Hey everyone, welcome to the Westley Warriors Show. The aim of this program is to give us the opportunity to tell stories with one another and use them as tools of empowerment to confront hate and ignorance in our everyday lives. Please note that these stories are for entertainment and educational purposes only. These are not substitutes for professional legal, medical, or financial advice. Enjoy the show. Hello again, and thank you for dropping by to hang out. Today, I am joined by Mrs. Shannen Flannery, an English teacher from my old high school that retired a couple years ago. She has a son that is set to graduate in June, and her daughter is currently in ninth grade. Mrs. Flannery has spent her retirement volunteering and has taken up writing spiritually motivated pieces. Welcome, Mrs. Flannery.
Thank you for having me. I'm so delighted.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Please tell us more about yourself.
Well, I did retire from teaching a couple years ago. I had a shift out of the classroom. And prior to my teaching career, I went to college to become a writer. And so that's something that has stuck with me throughout my childhood and then college and then throughout my career. And now I'm able to really embrace that back into my life when I didn't really have time to do that when I was teaching. So I'm very excited to bring that gift. I feel it's a gift to bring it back to light and start sharing it with people. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I also volunteer at the Audubon now and then when they need me, and I take care of the resident raptors there. So I'm finding really good use of my time.
Nice, I'm glad.
Mhm. Yeah, it's been great.
Sounds like you've had quite a journey then during your teaching career and after retirement.
Yes. Yes. A journey is the perfect word, right? We are all on journeys, and the best thing to do is recognize that, they change, and you do meet obstacles now and then that are unexpected, right? And they come up and you're like, wow, where'd that come from?
Glad to know you're overcoming them.
Yeah, and when you find yourself in places like that, you'd be surprised at how much just asking for some help really does help, right? So you have people who care about you who want to help, and so overcoming those obstacles is something that, I didn't expect that when I retired that I would feel so differently. And so now I have this whole tribe, my tribe, right? You have a tribe of people who support you in addition to nature. And so I found ways to kind of navigate those experiences that were unexpected. So trying to get that out there through my writing is a goal of mine to get people to feel less alone when they're struggling.
That's really sweet. It's kind of funny because I used to think once I graduated high school, the learning doesn't stop. But now I realize that we still are learning, especially as more things are changing and the political climate in the United States and the rest of the world is continuing to change. So it's like we're still living in history.
We are, and we're making it every day. And the question to ask yourself is, what stamp do I want to, what's the legacy or stamp I'm going to leave? And I remember teaching that speech called The Legacy, and I would preface it with, this may make you uncomfortable, but whether you like it or not, you do leave an impact. So you could say you don't want to, but you don't have a choice, right? So,
Right.
you're here as a being on this planet, and we all have a certain amount of time to impact it in a way that we wish. And so that's a very powerful thought. If you really think about it, what is the mark I'm going to leave here? And I know that being of something, positive and of light is where I want to be. So I always try to project that with, being in the classroom with older students. And that was a blessing that I had older students, because I feel like they really understood that. Like, wow, I didn't think of it that way, you know. Um, And there is so much changing every day, and we are part of the history. So the question is, what part do you want to be of, right?
Right.
hmm
How has high school changed in recent years?
I love your question. I think anyone in education would tell you it's been a major shift since the pandemic. So pre-COVID, we were really mostly autonomous as teachers, right? So were kind of trusted to do what we're supposed to do, which is embrace the learning of our children. You know, I always taught from the heart, and I realize that that's not everybody, but I always taught from the heart. When you walk in one way, I want you to leave another, right? Whether it's being uplifted, knowing something more, or just overall feeling better. And I feel like if you can reach people that way, it's so important. First, you build a relationship first, then the learning comes. Because who wants to learn from someone they don't like? It doesn't really work great. So then when the pandemic came, it shifted to not being together anymore, and that sense of community really became skewed. And so the community and culture and climate I created in my classroom all of a sudden became really perforated, and that kind of energy that kept us together kind of fell apart. And so that with the combination of, the unknown, everybody's afraid, we don't know what's going on. And then the sheer exhaustion of it, the mental exhaustion, are your students okay? And so what ended up happening through those couple of years, we had the distance learning, and then you had the hybrid learning, and then everyone came back. But during that time, a lot changed. And it ended up being where the public became much more involved in education, which you could say would be a good thing. However, as you know, there's a whole slew of what the public is. Okay. So you have the public who are there for, positive, reasons, right? I want to make this better. I want to help my children. I want to help their teachers. I want to help the school. And then there's this other side to things, which is just in nature, right? You have the light and you have the dark. You have the good, you have the bad. And it shifted. I felt a big shift. And so it became where teachers weren't trusted anymore. Parents didn't, want the schools calling the shots. And it became, there's this negativity that came in that was unexpected. It was really unexpected. And so I think after that, I started to kind of question, do I want to be in this environment anymore? And, honestly, when you think about this, like you love music, and you go to see someone perform, and you are watering that person by your presence. You're nurturing that person. You're a fan. You're like, yes, this is great, right? And that person is successful because of you, because you're there. You're buying the music, you're buying the tickets, you're buying the merch, right? So if you kind of use that same metaphor as a teacher, right? When the teacher's in the classroom, the students buy in. They're your energy. They're the reason you're there, right? So you have the students, and then you have the colleagues, and you have, administration. You have layers of support. When that support falls apart, you have no reason to be there anymore. And that's what I found is I went unwatered. And even, beautiful gardens have to be watered. And they are only beautiful and great for so long until they're neglected. And I felt that, the pandemic really shifted everything. And so the nurturing isn't there anymore. And I feel that's what's happened, at least in my personal experience in a public high school, that the nurturing and care that I had begun my career with has vanished. It's dried up. It's not there anymore. So I can't work in a place that doesn't spiritually feel connected with me, you know?
That's, that's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not alone. I'm not alone. You have a lot of young teachers who are in there for 3 to 4 years, and they're like, I can't do this anymore. And it's the service industry as a whole, because it's also happening in healthcare. you know? It takes a long time for a person to become a nurse, and a lot of nurses are like, I can't, they give so much, and then there's a major nursing shortage right now because it's just give, 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 and there's not that energy back to sustain, right? So, um, but I'm hoping honestly that we get to a tipping point where it'll start kind of, coming back to that nurture and that way of working in that nurturing environment. I don't know what it will take, but I'm hoping it'll come back.
I hope so too.
Hmm.
When you put it like that, attending the Eras tour in Foxborough, Massachusetts, it's like a classroom full of hundreds of thousands of people, and Taylor Swift, as you can see on my
Yes.
t-shirt, is able to keep those people engaged. It feels like going to school, except it's not really school.
Exactly, exactly. And they want to be there, right? But if you continue with that beautiful example and suddenly you take a person who's lost interest in music, they're not going to be there, right? You have to have the interest, you have to have the love, you have to have the spark. And so that's why she has so many amazing fans who love her because she's so dynamic. But if suddenly one by one people just said, I'm not going to listen to music anymore, which would be hard to happen, but just, for the example, even she too wouldn't be able to get on a stage with no one there. And that's how the classroom started to feel for me. I'd have 20 students, right? And 10 years ago, I could win over probably 19 out of 20 of those students. And then it shifted that I could win over maybe two out of the 20 cared about being in school at all. If you don't care, what am I doing here? And and I'm not alone, and I know that. But it's also, that's a challenge, right? Because you go to college for a long time, you put your whole heart and soul in a career, and then all of a sudden it's like gone, you know? And many people could relate to that, and I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. So,
It's a wonder why it's a wonder why a bunch of kids in my generation, and myself included, I feel guilty of it, dread going to school because I think part of the reason is the engagement's not there. They don't have a reason to be excited about learning, and a fundamental aspect of teaching getting them is getting them thrilled about learning.
yes. And if you are invested enough and dynamic enough, you can pretty much take anything and transform it into something someone at least will pay attention to, right? So I know I always struggled with math, very much so. And but as someone who responded very well to encouragement, it was my teachers that got me through, not my skill. It was the teacher who was with me. It was the teacher who stayed with me senior year to help me pass geometry, right? It was that engagement. But what ends up happening, I feel like, is the teacher or professor systematically what has happened, and you see this happening everywhere in service industry, is that dynamic, that structure is not the same. So, fundamentally, if you kind of think about another metaphor, because that's how I talk, right? If a building is starting to fall apart, it doesn't matter how great a shape you're in. If you go in the building and it's metaphorically, not sustaining you, it's going to get to you after a while. It's going to get to you. And I think, you know, you and your peers and your generation are kind of sniffing that out in the classroom, right? So you see what's going on and you see these amazing people, these amazing teachers, professors who are burnt out because they're carrying the burden of it all because the school isn't as a whole isn't doing it anymore. And it's supposed to be a dynamic, a web of responsibility, and it just isn't the same. And it's not just in public education, high school level, it's at the college level too.
Do you recall what books were part of the curriculum in your classes?
Do I what?
Do you recall what books are part of the curriculum in your classes?
My classes, they don't teach what I taught anymore. So books that are not taught anymore include Huckleberry Finn, which I taught for over 10 years, never had a problem. Uh, Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, which is on Broadway right now. And I actually volunteer for the Arthur Miller Writing Studio out of Roxbury. And no one teaches that. And let's see, The Scarlet Letter. It's too hard, so they don't teach that anymore. Let's see. I think probably those are the main three that I think are not taught anymore. So my own children at home, um, are my son has read them, my daughter will read them. So, um, and I think with Huck Finn in particular, the book had been part of our curriculum for about 50 years. 50, not 15, 50. And then after COVID, it was, oh, Shannon, are you teaching Huck Finn? And I had stopped because I didn't want to have that conversation about the language on Google Meets with parents who are at home listening to me teach their children. So I decided, you know what, the risk isn't worth it for a parent to misunderstand why I'm teaching the book because it is a very controversial book and the language is very controversial. And if a parent just catches me talking about it, they might be like, why are you reading Huck Finn? Well, sit down and I'll tell you. What parent's going to do that? I don't know. But anyway, those are the books that I know are not being taught. Death of a Salesman, if you've never seen it, the play was also just at the Hartford stage, and it's extremely powerful. It's having a resurgence, at least in the literary community. I would love to see it in high schools. Last year or 2 years ago, I met a group of high schoolers from New York City who came into our conference and talked about it. They read it and they were very moved by it. And I think it could teach people a lot. It could teach people so much, and you should read it. It's a beautiful play. And if you don't want to read it, you could find I believe it's 1987, or I think it's 1987, Dustin Hoffman's film with John Malkovich. Dustin Hoffman plays Willie Loman, and I would show that in my classroom. Um, and remember, I had struggling readers, so I taught this play to students who were struggling. It was not in an honors class. It was not in a college class. This was a struggling learner class, and they were hooked on every word. So,
I remember when I was in 11th grade, do you remember Miss Keisha?
yes.
She included the first Hunger Games book in the curriculum in her class, and it was pretty mind-blowing that she started going into a unit on utopias and dystopias. And now that I see what the education system and our country as a whole has become, I thought that Miss Keisha was onto something.
Oh, 100%. And you have to get what speaks to people, right? And I think part of the classics, the stretch is that as a teacher, if a classic book doesn't speak to you, then how are you going to sell it to your students? Whereas the Hunger Games speaks to a lot of people. So it's natural. That was a wise choice to bring it in to say, all right, let's take a look at this and how is this structure emulated in life, right? Ray Bradbury was very good at that too. I don't know if you ever read Fahrenheit, but Ray Bradbury was really good at that too. He's a personal favorite of mine.
Oh, goody.
Yeah, I love Ray.
Why is it necessary to read banned books?
Banned books. Ah, well, as someone who likes to say, watch me try, that's my motto. Um, because it's banned, to me, it's more compelling. I want to find the reason people are offended. Not because I want to be offended. I'm just curious to know what's so offensive. And I think that's an amazing reason to read banned books, right? So Huck Finn has been banned all over the country since it's been published, 1885. So you're talking over 100 years people have banned this book. And I used to show video, amazing video, VHS in my classroom when they still had TVs. And it was a mom who had wanted the book banned from the school. And the professors who were brought in to speak, a diverse group of professors who came in. And the mom was worried that her daughter was going to be exposed to the language, and the language is, offensive. And but what she didn't understand was Twain wrote it that way on purpose because to be offended meant to say, this is wrong. We are treating people wrongly, and we need to step up and do something about it. That was his whole motive for writing it, right? People don't want to see it. They want to jump on what they think is wrong without learning more. I want to learn more. I want to read and know more. And I'm fascinated by that. I don't want to jump into fight because I am not interested in that. And at this age, I'm not, you know. But when I was younger, I used to imagine writing when I would write a paper for a book, someone arguing with me. And I would always tell my students that, right? When you write something, you write it so powerful, you try to make it inarguable. And then you even write it more, right? So you imagine someone fighting with you about it, right? So if the theme of, The Great Gatsby is blah, 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 you go in all in and you fight it in your papers. And they really did very well with that. So banned books to me are an open doorway to a new experience. I say go for it. Go to the banned book section. I want all of them. That's
Yes.
just me though.
Now more than ever, based on current events surrounding Connecticut's political landscape, why is English a necessary subject in a student's education?
Freedom of speech, right? So I had the blessing of teaching public speaking as well. And I think what's missing is we can approach things that we don't agree with in an artful manner. And I think that is what's missing. I think the art of language and people communicating with each other has been skewed and torn and even tainted by the internet, by having constant communication. The idea that everybody needs to be heard is important, right? Very important. But the manner matters. The manner in which you present yourself is what counts. I feel as though English classes, reading classes, when you're younger, they separate the reading and the writing sometimes. I feel that that has been put on the shelf for STEM. I feel that art, creativity has sadly been put on a shelf for a bit. And I think that reading is what's going to bring it back. Reading the banned books, empowering your voice, taking a public speaking class, learning how to write a speech, learning how to talk to someone who doesn't want to listen to you. Like learning those skills is so powerful. And I used to say to my students, if it wasn't for the build, if it wasn't for math, we wouldn't be in the building. The building is made by math. Any structure is made by that, right? You have these brilliant, amazing people, many who I was friends with who do this. This is their life, right? But the color comes with art. The color comes with art. It's the artistic nature of creativity. And creativity is the highest form of thinking you can do. In order to be creative, you have to go through every level of thinking. Every single level. I used to teach Bloom's taxonomy in my classrooms, and I would say to students, people put down memorization. Well, if you didn't memorize the alphabet, how could you learn to write your name? You have to. So English is fundamental to me because without it, how are we ever going to get people to understand us?
Without English, it's easier for corrupt politicians to manipulate us.
With the power of speech. With the power of speech. Yeah. And it's one of the basics of public speaking is know your audience, right? So when you learn who your audience is, a great public speaker doesn't it make it about him or her or them. They make it about the audience. What do they need to hear from me that's going to get them to understand, right? So, what is it that I need to do to get them to understand where I'm coming from? I have to make it about them. So, even if it's something controversial, something, charged, there's a way to do it. There's a way to open the discourse and be willing to listen. And that was really hard to teach students within that first like couple weeks is like, it's not about you, even though you're writing it, you know? Um, and I remember a student said to me once, Miss Flan, I love this class because I feel like I'm in kindergarten again and I'm relearning things, but I'm like a senior, which was great.
What is a famous quote every teacher should have on display in their classroom?
Mark Twain, give every day the chance to be the greatest day of your life.
Good choice.
Mark Twain. Yeah.
What inspires you to write, and do you have aspirations to one day publish a novel?
I do. I do. I wrote a couple of children's nonfiction books when I was still teaching, and that was super fun, super, super fun. And then when I left teaching, I started to write at night, and that's where my spiritual books come in. So I am an intuitive, so someone who kind of just it's really hard to explain, but basically, if you've ever heard of automatic writing, I do automatic writing. So I go into this beautiful, safe space and I just start writing. And it's kind of like I'm not even thinking about it. And it's very strange because I will tell you when I was a teacher, I had the same kind of influence when I was teaching. So if a student was struggling, I'd go to that student and then this intuitive answer would come. And I always was able to figure out what does the student need? Never questioned it. It just arrived. So that same kind of phenomenon happens when I'm writing. So my aspiration is to help other people connect with this amazing sense of encouragement from I'll just call it spirit, right? We don't really know what it is, but I know it's from a good place. We know it's good. And it's wholesome and it's healing. And so when I started this, honestly, Wesley, I was in a really sad place. I was in a really hard, sad place. And my husband said, Shannon, what takes you out of those places is nature and writing, right? Some are music. Some people are like, I'm going to jam out. I'm going to jam out these feelings. I'm going to sing out these feelings. For me, it was writing, but for others, and music or exercise. Some people go for a run. They're like, oh, yeah. I got to get this out. Me, it's writing. I'm like, and I write to music too. So, and I would love to help people recognize that writing is a tool to help them overcome their troubles, or at least for momentarily say, you are not alone. That was my biggest message in my mind was I felt alone. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if anyone could understand this. And then all of a sudden these beautiful messages of hope and love and understanding and clarity were coming through in my nightly journal. So what I did is I typed them all up. Not all of them. I typed up 365 of these passages. They're 3 paragraphs apiece. And I put them together and I sent them to some publishers and I didn't hear back. So like, you know what? My husband's like, why don't you put them on like little like printables? So I was gonna do that. And then like, I didn't have anyone sign up for them. So I made ebooks. So I just put them out there like 3 days ago on Facebook. And I think I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I've been inspired by you, Wesley, to consider starting a YouTube channel. So I'm very excited. And I think that's how I'm going to get my work out to the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How important is volunteering to you?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything. When I left teaching, I left that tribe of people, that group of people who were my family, right? I was there, I taught for 18 and a half years. I was there for 16 and a half, and they were my family. And when I left, I only kept in touch with a couple of people. So I had to reframe my life with new people, new experiences, because I would be at my desk at 6:15. I wouldn't leave till 3 in the afternoon. That's a long day. Suddenly I'm home, I'm having my coffee, and I'm looking at a window I didn't have for 16 years. I had no windows. So I saw an opportunity that the Audubon needed help, and I jumped on it. It was totally out of the blue. I'm not a person who does new stuff. And I'm like, I need to do something. And then with Arthur Miller, I had been involved with the group before I left teaching. So they're awesome people, and they're trying to move his studio in Roxbury and settle it, his writing studio. So volunteering is it feeds you in a way that nothing else does. And so it's work from the soul with no expectation of anything back. It gives you the energy, and you don't even recognize that what you're doing is going to do that. It's like afterwards when you're like, when I'm leaving where I was or meeting new people, I'm like, none of that would have happened if I just didn't put myself out there. So I highly recommend volunteering. I think it's so important. Hmm.
That's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Flannery. I'm really glad you came by today.
Thank you, Wesley. And it was so wonderful to see you. And I wish you all the best and so much luck on this. I'm so proud of you.
You're welcome. That means a lot to me. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Check me out my main channel and my other platforms. Thank you for taking the time to watching today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Go.